Good evening. How's everybody? Hope everybody's doing well. I think I might be a minute or two tardy here. I got knocked offline. It's a little stormy in Western North Carolina this afternoon, but I believe we'll be fine. Everybody doing okay? All right, so let me minimize my screen here. So next week we have our final case study. Anybody have any questions about our final case study? Make sure that you are very comprehensive in what you're doing in terms of addressing teacher supervision, the inclusion model, discipline, walkthroughs, formal observations. I mean, it kind of puts everything that we've been doing all semester kind of together. So please make sure that you are very inclusive in your responses to the questions. Again, let me remind you, don't get caught up in where it takes place. We have similar situations and similar positions in this country. This one just happened to be set out of the country. Is another one of those layers to kind of confuse you. So make sure you don't get confused by those kinds of things. All right, so let me share my screen. So let's talk about your final weekly assignment, where you were to read about the female student who reported harassment from her coach. So my question tonight is, what should your first response be? Somebody, anybody? No volunteers?
Well, I think it's been a while since I did, but I think I remember I would always first probably call my central office and ask for advice on anything that's legal. I'm going to touch base with my assistant superintendents and the people that I have, and I would get input from them first before I do anything. And then of course you're reporting it to law enforcement, but first. But then I'm always going to take. I'm going to talk to the central office about what steps to take.
I think, I mean, tonight we're going to talk about these kind of issues tonight. I think the biggest mistake that administrators make is they launch an investigation themselves before they consult with law enforcement or central office. Now, the question becomes, which one do you consult first? It's kind of like the field trip deal. Do you call the central office at the bus garage first, or do you call 911? Well, that one's real simple. You call 911. You're not a medical doctor. Any delay in emergency services could be costly in terms of negligence. We're going to talk about negligence again. Nonfeasance. You had a duty to act and you didn't. The first call in any emergency situation is always 911. Now, you can't delay medical services because you'll be asked that question, and hopefully it won't be under oath on the stand. But when the lawsuit comes, as usually happens in the accident, you want to make sure that you're covered. Second call, central office, back to the school, bus office, whatever the protocol is in your district. Now, one of the things that we get into with sexual harassment, the first thing that I hear is, well, is that really a crime? Yes, sexual harassment is a crime. We know that. Anytime a crime occurs, what is our first call? It's always to the police, always. Has to be to them. What you don't want is for there to be an accusation of, well, they called the central office and made up, and got their story straight before they ever started this. Because the first thing that's going to happen is in these cases where there's a lawsuit back against the district for failure to act, nonfeasance, negligence based on nonfeasance, failure to act, is they'll subpoena your phone records. That's the first thing that'll happen. And if your call did not go to the police first, you're going to lose. Just that simple. Just that simple. Doesn't matter what you did after that. If your first call was not to law enforcement or on the walkie-talkie to your SRO in your building, or to the local elementary, to the local high school, if you're an elementary that shares one or has one service to you, your first call's got to be to pull a resource officer. Your second call then is going to be to the central office. Now you say, but all right, Dale, but we don't know what to do yet. We need advice from the central office. You bring the police in. You make sure you get them on the way. And you're going to talk to your central office and you're going to share with the police what you've been told. Now, they will make a decision at that point whether to launch an investigation themselves, interview that person, or if they're going to leave it up to you. But they have the first right of refusal. Now, if it's not if there was no physical contact, sometime in the lower grades, they'll say, you just need to handle this one. And that's fine, as long as you have them on the record for doing that. Now, they're not going to do that if it's a report of, inappropriate touching or rape or sexual assault, sexual offense. They're going to pick that one up and run with it. But on these sexual harassment where it was just verbal, it's still against the law, but because of the age, especially if the kids are under 16, a lot of times they'll let the school handle it. And that's okay. You can then launch your investigation. The problem comes when you launch your investigation and bring them in secondary. They do not like that. Many times they'll say, we can't help you now. You've already contaminated the case. We cannot help you. And so my example, I probably told you before, was at North Mecklenburg High School. They had an interim principal. He had been a long-time principal, but he hadn't been out in the building in a while. There was a report of a student came in and reported a sexual misconduct. They launched an investigation and said, well, it was consensual, so, no harm, no foul. The mother went to the police and they said, we can't help you. They threw, and of course, we had to end up getting rid of several folks there at the campus. But the problem is even though the girl was 16, she could not consent, which is, by the way, the age of consent is 16. She was in a self-contained EC class. We know the law. If a child is mentally incapacitated, which means self-contained, they can't consent at any age. And so they misinterpreted the law, but the biggest problem was their first thought was, let's investigate this ourselves and keep this in-house. There is no in-house. As we know from due process, a student's rights don't stop at the schoolhouse door. And schools can't be havens for criminality. And so we have to make sure that we have to defer to the police when a crime has been reported to us. And if it's 2 second graders, they may tell us, you just need to handle that. And that's fine, as long as they're on the record doing that. But the biggest mistake we make in our business is, well, this was just a back and forth. We'll just handle this. No. That is not the legal way to handle this. And you won't come out of that one well. My second call would be to the folks downtown and say, this is what I've got going on. I've got the police coming. Do you want to send somebody out, or do you want me to talk with them, or, give me directions to proceed from here? Usually they'll give you the assistant superintendent in charge of that, or the Title IX person. They'll give you those, and they may walk you through it. They may say, tell the police and hold tight and we're coming out, or we want to be involved, or they may say, just make your report and see where it goes from there. but that'll be up to them. But your first call can never be to anybody but the police. It's very important. It doesn't matter if it's almost, you hang up the phone from one and call the other, doesn't matter. I can't tell you the number of times that I was that person on the other end of that line when the school would say, first thing, what was my first question I'd ask them? Have you called the police? Nope. Hang up and call the police then. Don't call me. Hang up and call the police first. Then call me back. And I'll walk you through, or I'll come out there with you and sit with you and walk you, and we'll get through this. But if you've not notified the police, my responsibility is to tell you, call the police. Don't get that wrong. And then, if you get your phone records get subpoenaed, it won't go well for you. If you call somebody else before you call the police, it just will not work well. Now, one of the things that I would recommend if it's a sexual offense of some kind, sexual assault, rape, indecent liberties, if it's assault, offense, indecent liberties, or rape, I would suggest that you not be involved in the investigation at all. You are not qualified to conduct an investigation of that type. Somebody from your central office needs to do that, or your police department needs to do that. If you're in a larger district that has its own police department, or if you have a detective, or if you have somebody that works for your district that does that, that would be the person that would head up that investigation. It may be a police officer, it may be a Title IX person, but unless you are directed to do that, you are forced to do that, you should not be involved because of lack of qualifications on your part. You do not want to make a misstep and cause a liability situation on yourself or for your district. Tara's got her hand raised. Go right ahead, Tara.
So my question is that for any accusation that's made?
Yes. Absolutely. That's a good question, because it's hard to sit there. It's easy after the fact to know that things are going to get out of control, but what they really pay you for is to be able to see into the future. In law, we call that foreseeability, that you could see that this was something that was going to go bad, or something was going to go wrong, or this situation was going to get out of control. It's called foreseeability. And you don't ever know which ones are going to become a court case, or is this going to be the scratch the surface on something real bad. Every one of these, the same protocol, get in touch with the police, let them make the decision whether they want you and the school district to pursue it, or whether they're going to pick up the case. Let them make that choice. And then down the road, if it turns ugly, then, hey, I called the police in. It was their call to give it back to us. Now you say, but Dale, that's kind of throwing them under the bus. Well, they'll throw you under the bus. If you started out and it goes wrong, they'll throw you under the bus. We don't want to have an adversarial relationship with law enforcement, but we that's why we defer to them every time. We don't just defer every now and then. Every time a crime has been committed, we defer to them, and they get their choice. And if you establish that relationship with them, you're going to be so much better off. But what they don't like, what police especially don't like, is when you pick and choose, or according to who it is, we'll keep this one in house and keep it quiet. They do not like that, because one of the things that happens is with SROs especially is people look at the number of police reports versus the number of incidents, and all of a sudden they get accused of not doing their job, or sweeping things under the rug, or being incompetent or lazy or whatever. They get the first right of refusal, because the school is not, again, the school can't be a haven for criminality. It's just a public place, and laws apply there the same as they do anywhere else in society. And that police person who is the SRO, that is their precinct, and that they're responsible for everything that happens or doesn't happen there. And you've got to build a good relationship with your SRO. And the way that you do that is make sure that they're always involved from the very beginning. They're the first call that you make. And once you establish that relationship with them, it'll become a good working relationship. But as soon as they find out that you sandbagged them, that you had one come in that, you know, was an affluent family or whatever, and you didn't want them to get involved or the police to know, as soon as they find that out, that working relationship is over with. It's done.
Dr. Lamb, since most children in our schools are minors, what role does the Department of Social Services play in the contact?
That may be where the police go. That may be what they tell you to do. But if a law has been broken, the first thing is we got to notify them. When you call the central office, they may tell you, all right, get in touch with the Department of Social Services, because we're required to report this to them. They will give you that advice. They will tell you. Again, excellent. There is a protocol. Police come first, then your contact at the central office, who that's their job, is to give you, advise you on cases like this, and they'll tell you whether to call social services or not. And that's why that second call's got to be to them. I would not call social services before I let the people at the central office till I consulted with them. I would make sure that they were aware, that they were aware of what happened. I'd say, I had this report. I've called the SRO. They're on the way. You know, we're going to see what they have to say. What would you like for me to do next? And they'll say, well, you know, because of the particular circumstance of that one, we better get social services involved and get them over there as well. Or they'll say, we'll let the police, you know, tell us where to go from here. Generally, when we get social services, it's generally abuse in the home. We don't normally involve social services when one kid is bullying or harassing another. We don't do that. But if we suspect that it stems from the home, that's when social services gets involved. And so, but again, we need to be told that. We need to make sure that we follow the protocol of law and then district policy. But we certainly don't get social services involved if it's just one kid bullying another. Not initially. We may down the line, but we don't initially. But now if it's a report of abuse in the home, that's the first thing when you call that person. That usually would be me. I'll tell you, yep, you got to call social services. Wait on the police, hold tight, I'm on the way. Call social services, get them on the scene as well.
And that does that include suspicion of teachers neglecting or abusing children as well? That is correct.
You know, one of the things that we get accused of all the time, and that's one of the documents that I've got under tonight, is that a kid came and said the teacher did this to me, and that's why this case is about the coach. You know, it's a bad look if we call somebody in our district before we call the police. Because what does it look like we're doing, even if we're not? It looks like we're covering up or you know, for that person in that employee. And we're trying to, you know, not make our school look bad or get bad PR or whatever. If the accusations against a staff member, this notion of, well, we'll just let employee assistants handle that over in HR. It's a crime. We have to report. We are charged with reporting all crimes. Go back to 115C288 in North Carolina and South Carolina. There's a similar one there. Duties and responsibilities is report certain acts to law enforcement, period. And that's one of those things that we have a duty and responsibility to report. Any sexual crime of any nature has to be reported to the police. Now, sometimes you may feel like, well, boy, that'll make the district mad if I bring all this unwanted media attention. Yeah, but it's not as bad as the lawsuits that are coming if you don't. I mean, you're not in a winning situation either way, but you better be in a legalistic situation. Now, I'm not going to tell you that some small districts won't be kind of perturbed, but you know, but they're not going to be getting in front of the bull when the law comes after you, though. And when you get sued, they're not going to know your name. One of the mistakes that folks out in buildings make is they think the central office is one entity that everybody knows. No, the central office is like a bunch of little warlords. They all got their little kingdoms and little fiefdoms. They fight among themselves. They're always in some turf war. They are not one organized, cohesive front. And there may be somebody over there that didn't like that you call the law. That's just too bad. You know, you can't take the hit. What they want you to do is put your career and your house on the line to try to cover up and not make them look bad. No, we don't do that. Now, most places folks are decent, but there have been times when the folks in the central office didn't like it that you called the police, but they know the law as well as you do. They're just hoping you don't and hoping it'll blow away. No, hope is not a plan. We call the law. So let's look at this. I've got a couple of things here. I'm not going to take too much of our time tonight. Not reporting sexual abuse. Assistant principal accused of not reporting student sexual abuse claim appears in court. An administrator reported a 10-year-old girl to recant her claims of a relationship with a teacher. That's exactly what we're talking about. That's exactly the question that Tara had there. That's what we're talking about. And even if there's no merit to the case, and even if we think, well, this person's just seeking attention or whatever, it doesn't matter. Especially if the accusation is against somebody who works in the building, you've got to get the police involved. I followed this case and read through it pretty carefully, and that's why I've got it in here. The assistant principal wasn't a bad person. She just thought the kid was, this was a kid that cried wolf on a regular basis. And she said, no, I just don't believe this. Are you sure that Mr. Vasquez did this? And did all of that instead of calling the police. And it boomeranged back on her. She ended up, serving. She ended up serving 2 years hard time over this. Because in fact, the man, even though he was well thought of in the community, he had in fact been sexually abusing students. And he had an inappropriate relationship with her. The AP just could not believe that about him. He was such a nice man. She just couldn't believe it. But see, we don't ever know. We can't know until an investigation. Even sometimes when the investigation is done by the police, we still are not sure. But in this case, it turned out he was abusing this child, and and more than just her. But it was one of those kids that that always tattling on somebody always telling something, and she just couldn't believe that. And so she got pretty demonstrative with the kid, trying to shake her off of her story because she felt certain that she was just as she had done in the past, reporting things that hadn't happened. But in this case, it was at one time when it actually had happened. And so the AP was not a bad person. But she was trying to, she just didn't believe the student. And, and sometimes, and she just acted inappropriately. She didn't follow the law. And she ended up getting a 2-year jail sentence, and she served about 18 months of it. That's happened. Now, I had a case at a high school in the eastern part of Mecklenburg County where there was a report of a rape on campus, and, they didn't believe the girl and punished her. Except the problem was the person who reported it was a civilian, was there working on the scoreboard and saw it happen. Ugh. And then we come to find out through the investigation, this was the third time this boy had done this. And because they'd covered it up the first 2 times, they obligated to cover it up the third time. And it got worse and worse. And the first 2 times was, inappropriate behavior. The third time was rape. They all had to go home. Well, as my wife used to say to me, is what happened to these people, honey? I said, I don't know. They didn't have to go home because they couldn't stay with us any longer. Principal, 3 APs, even down to the data manager, conspired to silence this girl. That's real. That happened. I had to be the one that dealt with that. This is real world scenarios. This is real world scenarios, folks. Their first mistake was the first time not pursuing it and trying to keep it away from the police the first time. And I felt certain, I couldn't prove it, I felt certain that because the school is not in the city limits of Charlotte, their resource officer there was not a CMPD, was a local town cop in one of the smaller eastern towns in Mecklenburg County. And I felt certain that she probably colluded with them. I can't prove that. But now, when it came time for court, she was Sergeant Schultz. She knew nothing. She didn't know a thing about this. She completely threw him under the bus, just like the folks did in Huntersville with the 16-year-old handicapped girl. You know, that's one of the things is, especially if you're in a smaller town police force, if you're in they won't hesitate. The bigger city ones tend to work with you better, and you have a better relationship. But the small town ones, they will not hesitate to throw you under the bus. They can't afford the liability. And so 3 APs, the principal, and even down to the data manager had to go on the one in the East High School in Eastern Mecklenburg County, in the small town out there, because they just simply cover it up and punish the girl to try to force her to stay quiet. I had to deal with that one. I still have sleepless nights over that one, folks. The pictures were, they were something you can't get over. You hope you never have one of those, but again, that's not a plan. You got to know what you're going to do when you do have one. And when I was in Burke County, one of the most popular teachers in the whole county, there was accusations made against him, and it was same sex. The problem was his wife taught for me, and there was an accusation that he had inappropriate relationship with boys, and he ended up he fought the charges and all that, and he resigned because the local private school offered him a position, and they were so excited to get him. Oh, he's the best teacher in the county. It wasn't long until they actually caught him with a boy, and that whole bunch got cleaned out. There was good evidence that he was doing that, and they hired him anyway. And that one backfired on them. But yeah, his wife taught for me. That was really hard. Kathy taught for me. That was really hard. But and if wife and 2 daughters, perfect looking little family, you just couldn't believe it. You just couldn't believe it. I'd met him a dozen times, different functions, he'd come to school. You just couldn't believe it. But it turned out to be horrendously true, unfortunately. And so circling back to the original question is every time you get a report, even if it's staff, even if it's a teacher, it doesn't matter what your personal feelings are, you follow the process, folks. You can't step outside of that. If you do, you put yourself at risk. It's just that simple. Other questions or comments about these sexual infractions?
I have a question, and it's more about the areas where it's more like gray areas, which I think we deal with more frequently, which is where you have maybe girls coming and saying they're just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There's nothing specific. So what is the correct way to handle that?
Again, you bring your SRO in. Your SRO says, I don't see anything, actionable here. And then you go, to your central office, you consult with them. More than likely what they're going to do is get your counseling staff involved, or send in a district counselor to work in a situation like that. That's best case scenario. But again, you let, when they say these things to the police is going to say, I don't see anything that's probable cause for me. Remember, you have more power in that than the police do. Your standard is reasonable suspicion. The police have to have probable cause. It has to be more concrete. When they hear the case and they say, no, I don't think there's anything actionable there, you've already contacted your district person, and generally they have the head of counseling, or they have the Title IX people get in touch with you, and they usually pick it up from there and come out and do something at your school. In the more responsible places, the Title IX folks have somebody that comes out and does that. I mean, Deb Caslick would come out in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and do a program for the teachers and the kids to help with those kinds of uneasy situations. And you've done your due diligence then. That doesn't mean it's automatically going to stop or they're going to feel better, but you've done your due diligence. Remember, I can't keep you from going to court. My job is so that you win. I hate to be that, that mercenary about it, but that's we're protecting ourselves. We're protecting ourselves and our organizations, but we got to follow through. But you're right. You get a lot of those in middle school or upper elementary. You get a lot of those where girls just say, I don't like the way I don't like the way he addresses me. I don't like the way he looks at me. I don't like our interactions. He goes out of his way to talk to me and I don't want him to. And that's that counseling piece that's got to come in, and we have to have, personal space, and we have to have those critical conversations, especially early adolescence. That's why I've said before, boys are stupid. They think if Cam gets a turn, then they get a turn. That kind of thing, because early adolescent boys are just that dumb. We also have to talk to girls about, you can't let this boy touch you or interact with you inappropriate and then expect that this one won't as well. So we have to have those kind of critical conversations. But that's a great question. I mean, these are hard for everybody. But in the wake of the Me Too movement, we're much more hyper sensitive to this now than we've ever been. And it's not being woke. I mean, it's following the law. And so in the end, the reason why this assistant principal got 2 years in jail, the court indictment states McIntosh not only failed to report the student's sexual assault allegations to the police department, but instead suspended the girl and forced her to apologize to the teacher and hug him at the end of the meeting. Now, hopefully you wouldn't be that dumb. But again, she was completely convinced, and I believe her, that she would have never thought that this man would have done that. Just like I would have never thought Kathy's husband would have been involved in sexual relationship with boys. You could have bowled me over with a feather. But, you got to follow through. You have got to follow through. All right. We need to remember our types of negligence. This is a really simple one here. Move it out of the way so I can see. Malfeasant, you intentionally did the wrong thing. Misfeasance is you did the wrong thing. You didn't intentionally do it, but you did the wrong thing. That means you didn't report. You didn't intend to harm anybody, but you did. Malfeasance, you intentionally harmed somebody. Like in our first case study, the teacher intentionally harmed Bobby. Her intent was to get Bobby. And then nonfeasance, you had a duty to act and you didn't call the police. You didn't call 911. You didn't do the things that you were supposed to do. So we have to remember those. I want to go back and do a quick review. Remember, we report what happened, not what happened as a result of. We report incidents, not outcomes. We don't say, well, if we didn't suspend that kid, we don't have to report it. We report incidents. We have to make sure that we report that. Here are the things that count against us in our persistently dangerous: homicide, assault, and bodily injury, weapon, rape, sexual offense, sexual assault, robbery, kidnapping, indecent liberties. All these count against us. Over a 2-year period, you get 1 year, you get on the watch list. If your numbers are bad the second year, you go home. That's federal law. But the biggie on this is, trying not to report these things because you don't want that to be on your campus, or you're trying not to report them because your numbers are going to be too high and you're going to make the persistently dangerous list. You can't let that happen. We talked about antecedent behavior, stop the little things and the big things won't happen. Zero tolerance, we talked about that. And so here are the things that must be reported right here. Sexual assault, sexual offense, indecent liberties. See right here? What does it say? Right there. Must be reported. What must be reported to law enforcement? All these different things. And one of the arguments that I've heard in the past is, well, it was just a report of sexual harassment. It was just verbal. I didn't think I need to get the police involved. What happens if you start that sexual harassment? Right here it is. All the different ones. See, the problem with the sexual harassment, the verbal part, as soon as there's any physical contact, it turns from sexual harassment to sexual assault. Therein lies your problem. You get in the middle of a sexual harassment investigation and you haven't told anybody because you thought it was just verbal and that the police didn't need to be involved. And all of a sudden you find out there's been some physical contact of some time. You can't go back and say, oh, let's do a do-over. Let's call them now and start, they're going to ask you why you've been investigating this. It never goes well for you. Never goes well for you. And make sure that all these things that had to be reported to law enforcement, that you have done that, and that you report it to the state. All these things have to be reported. And then make sure that you understand the difference over here in the end, that you understand all these different ones, what a sexual offense is, sexual assault, rape, indecent liberties, that you understand the difference of these. You need to understand all of these for the reporting piece. The police will tell you what happened. You may have to interpret it when you upload it into Power School, and that's kind of where I want to stop for a minute now. As I've told you before, what always concerns me is we cool off. We get a little time and a little space, a little bit of distance, and we have second thoughts about what we categorize these incidents as. Yesterday it was a fight. Today it's just aggressive behavior because we got all the blood up out of the hall, and that, my fat lip, the swelling when I broke them up, and then my swelling's gone down on my lip. So maybe I start thinking about things other than what happened. I start thinking about what's this going to mean? What's it going to do to our numbers? What is the political fallout of this going to be? And one of the things that you've got to be careful of is going back and having second thoughts or revisionist history, especially on the sexual stuff. Whatever the police tell you, that's what you interpret. That's what you put in. And even if down the road, even if that person is found not guilty in a court of law, it doesn't change what the police told you at the time. See, I've had people who didn't put anything in and said, well, the police just said this happened, but it hadn't gone to court yet. Whatever they tell us is what we put in the power school. If we have to go back later on and change it to something else, we'll do that. But we're not going to wait, or we're not going to put something lesser and wait till they're convicted. We're going to put down exactly what they told us. And that's why I said, read those definitions carefully. The police will tell you, this is what we're charging them with. This is what happened. That's what you put in right now. We don't wait and go back later and take something little and make it bigger, because guess what? That never happens. If we have to go back later and say, well, this person was found not guilty on this charge, then we can adjust it to something else. But don't be that person that doesn't put it in, or puts it in much less until the conviction comes. Whatever the police tell us is what we put in there. Now that won't make people happy, and it may hit you're persistently dangerous, but that's what we have to do. Or don't go back in and change it later. I told you the story of one of the small high schools. We had a couple of high schools that had been split into 5, which was a fool's errand to begin with. And that gave them a little bit of cover, in that the principals of those schools didn't have anybody really looking over their shoulder to make sure they were doing the right thing in the first couple of years of that, before they finally appointed an overall principal, until they finally got rid of them. But it was just a reporting nightmare. And so at the 5 schools over at Garinger, one of the APs that had been tapped to be the principal of one of the 5 schools, they got APs to do that because the state didn't recognize all 5 of the schools. They said, no, it's one school. And so she charged the boy, put it in as assault with serious injury, or with a weapon, assault with a weapon. And had the 10 days, went through all the appeals, all the processes to the board. The boy was excluded for a year. And after the initial hearing was held and he was given the exclusion, she slipped back in and took it out because it was going to put her over her limit. Well, when the court case came, there was nothing in the file that showed that he'd done anything, because she had gone back and reduced the incident to a simple assault. That kind of stuff gets you in trouble. So we report what happened at the time that it happened. We report what the police tell us. We make sure we don't get ourselves in situations where we're going to lose our house. Where we're negligent in some way, that we've done something that we weren't supposed to do, or didn't do something we were supposed to do. That's what liability is all about, is you do the right thing every time. Regardless of the political ramifications, we always do the right thing. We make the right call every time. We know what the right thing is. We should never be conflicted about what the right thing is. We might be conflicted about, about the political fallout or whatever, but we can't. Nobody in the central office is going to say, we told them to cover this up. We told them not to report this. We've never said don't report things. They're not going to stand up and get in the way of that legal bull that's going to run you over. They're not going to do that. It's not what they do. And in your attempt to protect the district, to avoid negative publicity in the community, will get you fired and lose your house. It's just that simple. You're good people. I know that. And you want to do the right thing. And you want your careers to advance, and you think if something bad like this happens on your campus, that it could hurt your career, and it could. But your career's over if you get caught doing something wrong. You have to balance those two. You have to always remember that. All right. Questions you have for me. So let's look at TaskStream again. You know that all you really need in TaskStream is your OMA this semester. If you got to your skip, you can continue to work with me and my shell. The shell will stay open through the rest of the summer, and we'll continue to work on the skip if you're working on it now. I'm telling you, we're going to require you to do the skip and the cap in the fall. If you're working on it, keep on going. The only other thing you have to do is your dispositions in terms of your DRF portfolio. Now, on your task stream competency folio, you need to be putting your artifacts in there, you know, and you know what your artifacts are. So let's look at that right quick. And that'll be the last thing that we look at this evening. All right, so all right, open-ended artifacts, again, would be when you did your regular clinical work at your school, 80 hours each semester. If you addressed a large or small group of adults and you've got some artifact like an agenda or minutes or a picture of you addressing that group of adults, that would be an open-ended artifact for dialogue, inquiry, and communication. Every one of the 21 competencies you can put an open-ended in. So if you did some kind of a good meeting where you addressed adults this summer, that would be a good parent meeting. You know, you can read the list, but I tell you right here which open-ended artifact that would be. So if you've done, look through your list. If you've done any of these things and you've got an artifact, a meeting agenda, a video, a picture, or whatever, an email, you know, a screenshot, upload those for these this summer. Now, from the OMA, and for those of you who got skip this summer, here are the artifacts that you would have generated from doing those. And so let's first look at the OMA. When you pulled your SACS report, your NC report card, that's an artifact. And that would start satisfy those. So if you've got one for the OMA, most specifically 10, 16, and 18. And so 10 is global perspective, 16 is results orientation, 18 systems thinking. But looking at the OMA, your school improvement plan, the teacher working condition survey, all that stuff that you pulled, a screenshot of that, those are all artifacts. Best practices from classroom walkthroughs, that's the task 2 that you pull that one from the APTEL. You could use that one. Federal, state, and local EC guidelines when you did your special POPS audit, your report card again, your EC survey, if you have one. Some schools do an EC survey. Your Power School scheduling manual. You work with that. If you worked with that this summer, if they let you put any instance in or they showed you that, that would be a good one. Federal, state law, any policy manual like your code of conduct, your best practice abstracts, process plan, duty roster, master schedule, supervision. All of those are artifacts that you gathered this summer and worked with. And so make sure that if you've got any of these, you can upload those as artifacts for the OMA. And then if you got to the skip, your district strategic plan, school improvement plan, your composite scores, your needs assessment survey or questions you sent out, your complete TWC results, district budget, school budget, that one, again, that one circles back to the OMA as well. Pamphlets, flyers, emails, agenda, correspondence, pictures of parent stakeholders event if you were involved in one of those this summer. So those are artifacts. Remember, competency analysis is your narrative that says what you did to become competent. These are the proof. These items, these artifacts are proof, and they go in your competency folder. And so let's look at that as well. Communication, YOAS one, you know, you could put an open-ended one in there. Change management, you could do an open-ended one there. You could do an open-ended one on conflict, creative. Okay, customer focus, you can put one of your OMA artifacts in there and a skip if you've got one, or an open-ended, and so on and so forth. You can see how this works. And if you did the skip, so there's another OMA under personal responsibility for performance. That's your academic performance, your test scores that you pulled, your state report card. There you go. That would fit an OMA. There's another one on responsiveness, sensitivity. Let's see. There's sensitivity. If you attended a student assistance team, if you participate in IAP, again, sensitivity, that's an OMA. Right there you go. So, you know, just look. Sensitivity, OMA. If you attended an IAP meeting, if you've got minutes or an agenda or a picture of you there, perfect artifact right there for sensitivity. And you can do the rest. Please remember, we don't put anything under digital learning competencies. I have those integrated into the others so that one of these has to be an open-ended, it has to be a digital learning, and it will be because we're having you use digital media to put them in there. So it will be. And so I want to shout out Sarah. Where's Sarah on my list here? There she is, top left. So Sarah, did you not put some in today?
Yes, I had some downtime, and I think I did
7.
I don't know, 12 maybe.
Yeah.
7.
I think I think
some of those were open-ended, so
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I lost count after 7 though.
Yeah, I think you did 12, and I had another student in my other group that did 7. I think you did 12. So congratulations to Sarah. See, she knocked out. How long did it take you to do that, Sarah?
Well, I was kind of, you know, I'd have stuff come up at school and I'd kind of go back to it. So, I mean, if I had just sat down and not had any interruptions, I probably could have got it done in about 2 hours, maybe less, because I had everything pretty mapped out anyway, and I had my artifacts saved already. So
yeah, exactly. And so perfect. Excellent answer. That's what I tell you. To do this summers, you just need 12. And you can usually knock that out about, you've heard me say that it does about 2 hours. That's right. You can knock it out in a couple hours. This is not writing a whole nother evidence or a task. About 2 hours, dedicate about 2 hours and knock you out 12 of those this summer, and you'll be in good shape going into the fall. Take you a couple hours. Just make sure you knock a couple of them out. All right, I had a hand raised question.
Oh yes, Dr. Lamb, I have a question. When is everything due? Like our last possible day?
Next Friday. Okay. About 10, was that 10 days? 11 days, something like that. You got about 10 or 11 days.
Okay.
And so, you know, you should be in good shape. We're not like we have anybody behind. We're doing pretty good. Other questions? I'm really looking forward to our last case study showing out next week. I want you to show what you've learned. You've worked hard this summer. You've done a great job. I want you to be able to show it through your case study. And it doesn't mean it has to be 100 pages long. It's just that you've been thoughtful and you've considered a lot of things, and you know what to look for, and you know what's important. You understand all the laws that follow this, and what principals should be doing in terms of supervision, and how to deal with parents, and all these different things that come to bear in this final case study. So I'm really looking forward to it. I was 2 minutes late, so we'll finish 2 minutes early. Anybody have anything for the good of the group before we go? All right, I'm looking forward to next week, our last go round. So everybody have a good week. Thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.